Where is it?
What?
This next sword fight.
I don't know.
You don't know?
And I would like to introduce you to my fighter, Mongol. He has the right sword, the holy sword.
We are talking about a true B-movie. We are talking Gladiator Cop. And this one was directed and co-written by Nick Rotundo and stars Lorenzo Lamas, James Hong, and maybe a couple of other kind of like, fairly kind of well-known character actors of that time. 1995. Here's the interesting thing with this movie, and why I say it's a true B-movie. This is literally a Frankenstein of a film. So in 1993, Lorenzo Lamas made the movie The Swordsman. And what Gladiator Cop is, and it has been marketed as sometimes, is actually a kind of sequel to that. But in actual fact, Gladiator Cop actually uses footage from The Swordsman. It uses unused footage from The Swordsman, because stuff that was left over from the cutting room floor from that particular movie, and then has some new footage, and it's all kind of jumbled together to make a new film. So it basically has Lorenzo Lamas kind of basically doing the same role as he was in 1993's The Swordsman, and it kind of uses, like I said, it uses unused footage from that movie as well. So it kind of has been named as The Swordsman 2 in some places, when in actual fact, all that footage is actually kind of the unused stuff, or actually stuff that is legitimately used in the original Swordsman film. And that's the interesting thing with this film. It actually has so much of the kind of the running time is actually about the bad guys, and not so much about Lorenzo Lamas's character. And as you can probably imagine, this movie ends up being a little bit of a convoluted mess. But let me just try and kind of make sense of the story for you and give you a rough idea of the plot synopsis. So Lorenzo Lamas' character is a guy called Andrew, and he is a cop who has basically psychic visions. Now, it's hinted at that he is the reincarnation of Alexander the Great. And just so happens that there is the lost sword of Alexander the Great is being displayed at this particular kind of museum, and is stolen. And it well could be an inside job, but in actual fact, what they wanted to they literally say this sword is priceless. And what they actually do is they use the sword that is endowed with kind of magical powers to try and win kind of like underground fighting matches and bet on them ultimately. Which seems ridiculous, because if the sword is priceless, then you can pretty much ask for whatever you want for it. Why you have to kind of like fight and death matches and stuff is beyond me. But anyway, that's what they do. So they kind of they have this fighter who's one of the kind of the robbers at this kind of who stole the sword. Everyone seems to have a ponytail in this movie. And so the bad guys are kind of doing all these around, and then James Hong's character is a kind of an old reincarnated enemy of the Alexander the Great, and he's got his own fighter who wants the sword, and Lorenzo Lamas is in there somewhere kind of having psychic visions and stuff, but he's really not in this movie a whole lot, considering he's meant to be the kind of our protagonist. It's, you'll think, why is he not in this so much? It's because, like I've said, that they have made all this new footage without Lorenzo Lamas, and then kind of inserted it into the film. So we have this whole storyline about this kind of like this bad guy having various kind of fights with like S&M looking kind of bad guys. So what works, first of all? Let's talk about any positives we can say in this. James Hong is an absolute treasure in this movie. I mean, he's been in tons and tons and tons of B movies. He's kind of like even joked about his own characters. I mean, he was in like the Wayne's World 2, and he kind of played a parody of the kind of the characters that he plays in a lot of these films. And he's kind of really hamming it up, really having quite fun here. And he's absolutely a treasure to watch on screen. I've got to say, I really quite enjoyed him here. And some of the fight scenes are actually okay. I mean, the costumes that they use are ridiculous. I mean, you also have, I guess you could compare this movie a lot to American Samurai, which was another kind of weapons-based kind of underground fighting ring movie, but it's kind of so, you know, it's this one that's so better than this one. I mean, obviously, Mortal Kombat was out, and that's kind of like that was like really popular in the kind of the mid-90s, and these kind of movies are obviously trying to cash in on that. In actual fact, one of the taglines of this film is Mortal Kombat meets Highlander. But there are a couple of kind of like fun sequences, and there's like the Mongol, kind of our big bad character. You know, he chops a couple of people's heads off and things like this, and there's a kind of a reasonable amount of blood there. But there are some kind of other action sequences involving some gunplay, the heist at the beginning of the film, that are fairly kind of poorly done. But we have to kind of there's not really too much to kind of talk about in regards to positives in this movie, because the story really is going to be the problem here, because it's just such a jumbled mess. It comes from really all different sources. It understandably is a kind of like a bit of a hodgepodge of a movie, and simply doesn't make sense. I mean, the guy, I could point out things all day with this movie, but let's just talk about a couple. So our kind of our museum creator who steals the sword, like I've said, we're told the sword is priceless, but he doesn't just try and sell it. No, he uses it very publicly to try and kind of like win. Well, he gets his kind of like his crony to kind of fight in these matches and stuff. Fairly easy to identify him. So he's really putting himself at risk. Doing all this kind of stuff where it's obviously the police are investigating. There's literally no characterization from Lorenzo Lamas' character. You know, he just kind of like is in the police station. We don't know anything about him. We just have to accept that he has these kind of psychic flashbacks. I think I have seen the original Swordsman, but I don't really remember it. But, you know, that may have kind of expanded upon. But in this film, it isn't. So there's just like, it's just one ridiculous thing after one ridiculous thing. It doesn't kind of make sense. Ultimately, just kind of to lead to these fight scenes. And while they are quite fun, some of the kind of like the costuming and stuff, it's just ridiculous. But it's kind of fun, I suppose. The acting, for the most part, is pretty horrible. I mean, even Lorenzo Lamas, who, you know, has had a fairly decent career, to be honest with you. Maybe not named the best actor, but his kind of like, when he kind of reels back when he has these visions, I mean, it is laughably bad, unfortunately. So I remember watching this movie when it came out on kind of on VHS, and I didn't have as quite a critical mind as I do now. And I really liked the American Samurai movie with David Bradley and Mark Dacascos. And this is like, I mean, that's a B movie, but this is like a bottom of the barrel B movie. So I can't really recommend this in any kind of shape or form. It's just interesting in a way to watch it for a weird kind of like hodgepodge film that was basically just essentially two separate things kind of glued together to make a barely coherent kind of story with laughable costumes, shitty acting, and yeah, just ridiculously over the top kind of themes. So what can I rate this one? 3 out of 10. It legitimately is not a good film, but there is some entertainment value just to kind of like to laugh at it to a certain degree. So 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.